Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw. That would be your Chickasaw native, your Chickasaw Hall of Famer, and also soon to be this weekend St. Louis Hall of Famer. A well-deserved honor for a terrific gentleman, Mr. Gerald Brisco, Oklahoma's favorite son. And we got the two-time NWA champion, held a million other titles. He's a podcaster, and me and Gerald also know he's an influencer. We're not influencers. We're excited to have him. He is Mr. Colt Cabana. We are excited to have him. Colt, welcome to the show.
Hey, well, you guys have influenced a whole generation of professional wrestlers. So before there was influencing, you were at it. John, do you produce and do all of this? Are you the technical wizard behind all of this?
Kinda.
Those are some strong word, technical wizard.
Yeah.
But yes, he is. He'll be. For once, you'll see John a little shy, but he's our tech guru on this show here.
I love it.
Mr. Brisco is the one. He is the legend whisperer, as I call him, because he can talk guys that are used to a rotary dial telephone into how to get on Zoom. I've never seen anything like it. He is the most patient person. He knows how to do it. That's one of the reasons he was such a great agent, because he's so patient. He just talks them through it. Okay, there's a camera there. It's got a line through it. Hit the camera. Okay, that didn't work. Go. It's quite amazing.
Well, it's so important, and I assume you realize that, Jerry, is like, to not like deny what's happening like in generations. Like you can't be like, oh, Zoom, that's for the young kids or whatever. Like you have to stick with what's happening or you just get out of touch. And I know, to see you on Instagram and all, and to cutting promos, it's the best. And I think it's very important to stay young by keeping in touch with like how the world works. I don't know if you'd agree. I assume you'd agree.
Well, I really appreciate that. Yes, I do. And that's one of the reasons I do it. I'm 76 years old, man. The world ain't going to pass me by. I'm going to keep on going. As long as I'm ticking, I'm going to learn what's out there. And I get a lot of big laughs out of it. A lot of people give me grief about it. I've had one very successful NXT guy over in Orlando. Why are you on that shit for? You're an old man. I said, that's exactly why. Because I want to learn new things. I want to keep ahead of your ass.
Right.
I'll be keeping at it. But Scott, before we go on, John mentioned St. Louis and the Hall of Fame. I'm very, very honored to be going in. The greats, the Luthers, the Dick Huttons, the Harley Races, the Jack Briscoes, the Fox, Ric Flair, Ted DiBiase, go on with the St. Louis greats. As you know, growing up in that neck of the woods, St. Louis wrestling back in the day, that was the place you wanted to be. If you made it to St. Louis, you could pretty well know that you're going to get some good bookings down into. But there's a little I don't know what they call it, cards or signing before Saturday afternoon before. And John's got a very important fund that we want to talk about on here. A very dear friend of both John and I, friend of our show, been on here and had some of the largest numbers we've ever had. But they're a page being set up. John, you want to go into this?
Yeah, thanks. And Colt, I'll be real quick. Black Bart, dear friend of mine and Jerry's, and so many different people. He's been such a terrific legend in the wrestling business. Every territory needs a guy like Black Bart. Just that good guy. He's a mechanic. He can work from the main event to the opening match. He can carry a title if you need it, or he can get young guys over like he did with me and Bobby Duncombe many times. But Bart has stage 4 cancer. He has about a 20% chance of living for the next 5 years, but he's fighting, and he's going through chemo. The chemo is killing him as far as his health, and he can't work. So he doesn't have any income coming in. And even though he has insurance, his chemo's costing him about $600 every time he goes in for the chemo. So there's a lot of out-of-pocket expenses. A group of us, myself included, have been helping Bart, and people ask us how they also could help. And there's a GoFundMe page set up. It's on my Twitter. It's all over it. It's different places. At the St. Louis signing this weekend, any money that I make will go directly to Black Bart and his stage 4 cancer treatment. So if you like Black Bart, come by. If you don't like me, come by and don't get a picture. Just give me money and I'll give it to Bart. But please support Bart if you can on a GoFundMe. It's a chance to support a legend who's done a lot for this business. So.
And now, John said that Black Bart can't work, but for all the listeners off air, Jerry said he never could. So I didn't think that was nice. I didn't think that was nice, but he said it.
And you know what? I wish Bart was on here to hear that. He did. He said, "What? Damn, Gerald Brisco."
You never kick a man when he's down, but if you're going to kick him, then when he's down is the right time to kick him. Especially a guy like Bart.
Hey, Colt, Bart used to sit in the corner of the dressing room. If you were around Bart, he'd always had the trash can he's spitting in, and he pushes his glasses up like this, and he had a good mouth, and he'd hear my cowbell coming in the sportatorium, and he always would say, "I hate the sound of that cowbell, because every time I hear it, that long, tall drink of shit Johnny Hawk's with it."
And what was your reaction to that?
Oh, I'd come and sit right by him because I could hear him say it because the walls were paper thin. So I would rattle the cowbell and Bart would go crazy. And I'd sit right by him and just bug him all day.
Just to piss him off a little bit.
Poke the bear, poke the bear, poke the bear. Poke the bear.
You know, it's fun that we have like all these different generations of people just in this call right now, right? And for me, it's like, oh, like why would I know Black Bart? But when I was wrestling in the Louisville area, when I just started in 99 and 2000, we had a wrestler who moved up from Texas. His name was the Necro Butcher. He would later become very famous in the movie The Wrestler. And he was like, you know, everyone, you know, you come from different places. Everyone asks who trains with who. And he was like, Black Bart trained me. So he was like fresh off Black Bart's training in 2000, 2001. And of course, all of us little wrestling nerds in the locker room were, who were, like our group was from the Midwest, and there's people from Ohio and just all different people in this locker room. And we were so intrigued by Black Bart because for us, we just watched him on ESPN, a little bit. So I remember Black Bart from like enhancement days from WWF. And then I think on ESPN, he would make, I think either Global, would it be Global, John? Is that right?
It was Global. Yeah. But he also worked in old WCCW days.
Yeah. Okay. In both of those. So I'm definitely aware of Black Bart, and I remember him, and I thought he was cool for sure. So
yeah, he was going to go up to WWE, and Ron Bass apparently didn't want to go or something like that when they were the Long Riders and our Rough Riders. The Rough Riders may have been him and Dutch. But he turned it down, then later went up and said he made more money than ever made, but he didn't do anything but jobs. So he finally ended up leaving, but he apparently was making pretty good money.
Oh wow, what's the decision between not going and then being like, was he like, whoops, I should have went when?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. He didn't go with Ron when they wanted him. I think back in the mid 80s or something like that. And he went up later, and he thought that was kind of held against him because he said no, and they just kind of used him to put guys over. And the thing was, Bart could work with anybody, so he was perfect at that. But he was also, Bart could be the main event of the promotion too, like he was champion in Texas for a while.
Well, Scotty, as you know, I mean, you were a Midwestern guy, and you're sitting around in the locker room. You're a new guy, and here's this strange guy. Were Texans a little strange, a little weird? You growing up in the Midwest?
Well, first of all, the Necro Butcher was strange no matter where you're from.
Yeah.
That's a very strange man. Yeah. I'm trying to think of like the Texans. So when I started in 99, it's kind of interesting because, every generation has a different, like, we're part of this generation, but I was really a part of the dying day. The dying wrestlers of the AWA were around all of our shows. So when I was young, 18 years old in 1999, the locker rooms would be Jake Millman and Kenny Sodbuster, and the Baron would be roaming around, and Bull Payne was a big guy. The Texas, not the Texas Longhorns. Who were they?
I don't know. He tagged with Killer Tim Brooks some. Bull Payne did.
Yeah. Yeah, they were a masked.
Sure what the name of the tag team was.
They were a masked gimmick. It's skipping me for now, but they went to Puerto Rico and AWA. So I was around these kind of wrestlers a little bit in my youth, and we weren't around the Texas guys, but we were around a lot of the upper Midwest guys, the Minnesota and Wisconsin wrestlers.
And what a place to grow up to. But tell us a little bit, Colt, about Scotty, and tell us, before the Western Michigan days, your high school days, what kind of athlete were you? And you just kind of mentioned your introduction to professional wrestling. But who were some of the guys that you kind of looked at, while you were coming up in the business? And wow, but tell us a little bit about your high school days, your athletic days there, because I know you were a tremendous athlete. Western Michigan.
Yeah, so I played I played 1 year of college football at Western Michigan. I was a great high school football player, or maybe a good high school football player. And I probably would have done really good at Division III, but I didn't even want to go to college. I just wanted to be a wrestler. But my parents were like, you have to go to college. I'm sorry. And so I was like, all right, if I go to college, then I might as well play the best football program I can. So when Jim Ross announces me, he'll be like, you know, it's better to be like, here's Colt Cabana from Western Michigan University as opposed to here's Colt Cabana from UW, you know, Wisconsin, Whitewater or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was my theory, was like, it would sound good on my resume. And I'll jump a little. The fun part of that is 22 years later, when I debuted for AEW, I got to ask Jim Ross to say that for me, that I played college football. Yeah. And only to pop myself and my friends, really. So I was really bad. I played 1 year. I was horrible. I call myself the worst Division I college football player of all time. I redshirted. I never played. All the coaches didn't really like me. I had a horrible experience on the team.
Other than that, how was college football?
It was awful.
What did you play?
I mean, I came in as a defensive end, but you know, in high school, I was a quick 6 foot. I actually played like the 3 position right off the nose tackle, and I was the king of the swim move. I would just it was so easy. I wouldn't have any interaction. I would just swim everybody, and then I'd go right to the ball and tackle whoever. So my numbers were padded very well. But when I got to college, everybody's 6'6", 6'7". You know, I was 6 foot 230, 6 foot 235. So I was moved immediately to outside linebacker, and I'm not that fast of a man. So, I was just, I was in a penny, and I was helping the practice team. But I wanted to be done the first day of 2-a-days, but I said to myself, I'm going to see this season out. I felt there was something about, this was my time growing up. Like I should, at least finish the season. I thought I would do that for myself. And so I finished the season. Though.
You realized the first day this wasn't for you, but you didn't want to quit. So
I did want to quit, of course.
But you didn't want to quit enough to quit. I mean, you didn't want to leave the team. You wanted to, but you didn't want to do it because
I think it was out of respect for myself, as opposed to, I could give 2 shits about the team, to be honest. I think it was a pride thing. Like, I set up for this, I should at least see it out for the year.
So who were you watching? You were a wrestling fan. What wrestling did you get when you were in high school?
Obsessed with wrestling. My first memory is seeing Andre the Giant getting his hair cut. I believe, looking back, it was Patera and Bobby Heenan.
Is this AAAW?
This would be WWF, I think.
Oh, WWF, okay.
Yeah. Because my dad was like a real casual watcher, but when I was watching it with him, and I was hooked. So WWF, growing up, we would go see my grandparents in Florida. They had Glow. I like that for wrestling reasons and other reasons also.
Teenage more reasons.
Yes, exactly. ESPN had Global. ESPN had WCCW. Also, Chicago had Sports Channel Chicago, which had early Windy City Wrestling, which later had to be changed to Windy City Pro Wrestling. But I believe Windy City Wrestling was first WCW, but Ted Turner had so much money, I think he was like, you shall not be at WCW anymore, and they had no choice. And I think, even like Paul Heyman was like booking those early shows for Windy City Wrestling in the early 90s. And then in high school, I would go out and like go to parties, but I would set my VCR. And then when I would come home, I would push record. And so it would record like 6 a.m. USWA and Windy City Wrestling. And
wow.
And like Memphis Wrestling. Yeah. So I remember like I would come home from high school parties, I would hit record, and then I'd wake up, Sunday morning, and then rewind to the tape and watch like, those weird studio USWA shows and Memphis shows.
Chicago. Go ahead, Jerry.
Did you ever try amateur wrestling when you were in high school too, because of wrestling?
I don't know what it is, but and maybe, I don't know if you guys have talked about this or hit on it, but I just saw them as 2 completely different things.
Yeah, good.
And good.
Well,
Jerry will agree with that.
Yeah, it was. I did too.
Okay. But like looking back at just like I feel as a coach, right, you should be like, if someone asks you, what should I do? You'd be like, get into wrestling, right? or and improv
Yeah.
theater. I tell
Right.
people.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I tell people now too, more than wrestling.
Right.
It's funny because I went to the train with Brad Ryan up in Minnesota. I told Jerry this before. All of a sudden we're suplexing this huge tree that he had for a workout. We're learning all these different Greco-Roman. I just want to learn the Iron Claw.
Mm.
This other stuff's really hard.
Well, Baron was right there. He could have taught you.
That's right. Barry was right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Baron was smart. Baron would get near John when John was a young guy because it's so big, Baron wanted to protect himself. but yeah, so you're watching a little bit with your dad, and you kind of got hooked in that. How did you, after Western Michigan, what was your process of getting over to where you wanted to be?
Well, okay, so I found the pro wrestling torch very when I was like 14 or 13 maybe, right? And that was the difference of like just being like a casual fan to being like, oh, what is this world? And once I was like reading as a 13-year-old of like the inside happenings of all of professional wrestling, and once I saw that there was like all of these little shows in front of 100, 200 people, that was kind of my like, I'd like to do this as a profession, right? When I was probably 13 or 14 years old, because I didn't think, as a chubby Jewish kid from the suburbs of Chicago, like I didn't think I could be a big arena wrestler. It just wasn't realistic, but I was like, oh, there's matches at the auditorium in front of 200 people. I could do that all day. And so that was my realization of wanting to do it. Again, went to, obsessed through high school and everything, went to college knowing that like after college I would wrestle, stopped playing football, continued my education. Of course, my parents made sure of that. But in between freshman and sophomore year, I started training at a school in Chicago. It was called the Steel Domain. It was a small storefront in Chicago across the street from a Dairy Queen, where some of the vets would go, have a blizzard after every practice, and which kind of blew my mind. And I started training, but in my vision, I thought training was going to be WCW Power Plant, the documentaries that you saw about it. And training was hard, but I was coming from a 2-a-day Division I athlete. So, it wasn't like I was prepared for the absolute worst. And I think because I was prepared for the absolute worst, I was obviously one of the better students there. And I caught on very early. And, before 2 months, all of a sudden, I was being put on shows and helping with the ring. And I thought that process was going to take years. But once you realize that, like, there were so many people that didn't even know, like one of the first days it was like learning a sunset flip. And of course, like just from watching wrestling, I kind of knew the mechanics of it. And there was another guy doing it to me, and he didn't know to roll backwards, and he just sat straight down on my head. And that was my first concussion and emergency trip to professional wrestling.
Was that Ace Steel? That was
Ace and Danny were the trainers there.
Danny who?
Danny Dominion was his name. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Oh, you don't know Danny? Local wrestler in Chicago, did some stuff. He wrestled for the now defunct WXO. I don't know if you remember that one.
No, I don't. That being down in Texas, I mean, we didn't get.
WXO was, I think, Ted DiBiase. It was all the Florida guys, and it was on TV for a second. It was Ted DiBiase, I think, and Stan Lane was the announcer. And they had TV, and they found themselves TV somehow, and it lasted, I think, 4 episodes, and then was taken.
Well, and another thing, during back then in the 90s, when you were talking about, we were working almost every night, so we missed everything. We missed football, we missed basketball, we missed any other wrestling. I never got to see ECW till we went there. We were wrestling every night. I didn't get to see the other show that we weren't on when we had split crews. So we missed. It's funny because I have this huge vacuum of sports knowledge from that time where I don't know any of those guys that were in that era, right. And before it I do and after it I do.
I was going to say that because I was a diehard sports fan, so much that I wanted to go be a sports broadcaster in my high school. And once I started wrestling, and even to this day, my knowledge is so pathetic. And I don't even really follow it that much. But did you guys both find yourself jumping back in? Were you able to?
Yeah, I was able to, but what a vacuum it was. I mean, and nowadays it's kind of funny, being my age, I get asked, I'm privileged to get asked to do some of these card shows. When September comes, September to February, unless they want to pay me something that's going to knock me off my damn socks, I'm not leaving my house, and especially going into a wintertime from down there in Florida. But I tell them, hey, I'm watching football. I got this call the other day wanting me to do a deal during Thanksgiving weekend. Not only is it the busiest time of travel in the entire year for airline travel, but it's also the best weekend for college and pro football together. So this guy, he just couldn't believe it. I mean, he was offering me some pretty decent change. And I said, nope. How about first class? Nope.
You got priorities.
I'm the same way. If it's college football Saturday, I don't want to go anywhere. I won't do appearances. I don't like to do anything.
So Johnny, when you're coming along and you're at the seal factory there, how and you're educated enough to know our business was a work and entertainment even at your time when you came in. Where did they? When did you notice the point of Steele and those guys kind of smarting you up for the business to get you ready to go into the match?
It's funny. I remember like we would just do like roll arounds, and I had no clue like what to do or why to do any of it. So there was a point of my training where I'm just like putting a move on someone but not really knowing it. So there was definitely a process of like learning to build a foundation of a match. And I think my first matches were very simple. My first match was with a guy who had been wrestling 9 years, and he had done a bunch of enhancement matches and stuff. So and he definitely like took me through it. And a bunch of those first matches were all taken through where I understand. I don't want to say like nowadays, but there's so many times where your first match is with your buddy, and it's like, well, if you both don't know wrestling in your first match, you can't. How are you going to know how to do it? So it was very nice for me that a lot of my first matches were with people who had 10 plus years in wrestling. And so I think as that process moved along, I mean, obviously, right, I was kind of smart-ish. I was a smart fan and then turned to, an understandable wrestler. But I think it was probably those first, dozen matches where I was with wrestlers who understood what they were doing. And then as that goes, it does click. And yeah, I think there's something to be, college educated. And, at the same time, I'm doing whatever math 201, at a university. So I process my brain does process stuff like that educational wise too. And I have like a math brain too. So I love the idea of like puzzles and formulas. So that's what I always loved about psychology of wrestling is the formula and the puzzles. And then all of a sudden, as I get 5, 10, 15, 20 years in, I love like, my brain is smarter to wrestling. So just understanding how to put the match in and how to use the crowd and how to use the ref and just to get really like deeper and deeper because, at first I remember there, a wrestler named Rockin' Randy Ricci, who was a enhancement guy in the USWA. He was like, here's the 7 steps of psychology. So like, that was kind of like something we went by at first. And I love the idea that here I am 24 years later, and I'm like, there's 7 steps, but there's 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, there's so many deep levels. And so I love that.
What are the 7 steps?
Oh God.
You got me curious. I want to know. I missed out on that class.
God, what
was it? I was down at Charlie's Pub down on the corner.
Yeah.
And John, have you ever heard this theory or no?
No, I know not about 7 step. No.
Okay, it's been so long since I said them. So I think it's 1 is establish yourself a baby and a heel. Right. You have to establish a baby heel. 2 is your baby face get some shine. 3 is a cutoff. 4 is heat. 5 is your hope spot. 6 is your comeback. 7 is your finish, I think.
Wow, very good. You know who else teaches those 7 steps? Booker T.
Oh, there you go. I thought you were going to say God.
No, well, he teaches them to everybody, but Booker T. I've heard Booker T. tell that to kids at his school down there in Houston. And he said them in the exact order. So must be the ones that are etched in
That's
stone.
interesting. I've never heard that. Go through, if you don't mind, go through it one more time.
Yeah, one was I believe it's establish your heel and your baby face, shine up your baby face, a cutoff, heat, hope spots, comeback, finish. And which is fun because when I was with FCW for WWE in the developmental system, I remember Dusty was like, he had shortened it down to like shine, heat, finish. Like I was like, oh,
well, he's a Texan, so he couldn't remember all 7 of them.
Wait, that's not nice.
Yeah. I remember he simplified it so much. He was just like, because I had this mathematical equation in my brain of a match, and he's like, nah, just dip, you're done. It's not. He's like, wrestling's not hard. I was like, okay.
It's like a movie though. I tell people all the time, movies the same thing. You look at any movie and they're basically all the same as like a 7 or 8 minute wrestling match. And once you get to like a 30 or 40 minute, then of course that's where your hope spots come in. That's where your roller coaster. But the movie's the same way. You shine up the baby face. You create this great guy that you want to get behind. Then you put him in peril or his family in peril, whatever else. Then you have the big comeback and the finish. It's very tried and true, tested formula.
Yeah. But then there's like the Aronofskys or whatever it might be, who like take it and like, it is the same, but they twist it so much and they play with it. And those are like the greats, right? And so like, I think those are the greats in wrestling. And I'll talk like modern wrestling, like, for my beliefs, like, I think the Young Bucks and I think the Kenny Omega, like, I think they're so great because and I always say this to people, it's like, like, in order to break the rules, you have to know the rules. And so like, they knew the rules so well, like, by doing all the super kicks and wrestling the way that they do, like, they're very aware of what the tropes are. And that's why it's so great, because they're breaking the tropes and they're aware of the tropes and they know how to break it. And like, and I believe, I kind of believe that is that like, there is a pattern. And then, to break off a little bit or to like play with it or play with the art form is what makes it great. And I think that's what makes the difference between, a great movie. I was going to say Citizen Kane, but I've honestly never seen Citizen Kane. Is that bad? I don't know. But, like a basic Hallmark movie or just, Requiem for a Dream or whatever it might be.
So Orson Welles is the only great hit, really.
Citizen Kane?
Yeah. It's a great director. Then he puts on like 4,000 pounds and endorses wine the rest of his life. So,
nothing wrong with that.
That's the dream. That's the dream.
Anything wrong with it. That's what happened.
Yeah. So as you're coming along through Chicago, the streets of Chicago, and the back arenas in Chicago, back street arenas there, kind of back street affairs or whatever. Yeah. John's had a few of those in this time, I think. But he's a married man now. They don't go on the back street. He don't go on the back streets anymore. So Jerry
told me he's supposed to be a groomsman in my last wedding, and he said, "I'm sorry, I can't make it. My kids made the state wrestling tournament." He goes, "But I'll come to your next one."
Yeah, I was gonna say. Well, you said your last one. How many you got?
Oh, only 2.
Okay.
Only 2.
sounds worse than it is, but Jerry, it works better for the story to say my last one.
So as you're coming along, you're obviously picking up steam and you're learning the business, you're learning your craft very well. What are your steps that you're taking? I mean, at that time, was it WWE that was your goal to come?
Harry, I told you the steps. 1, establish baby heel. 2, shine your baby face. So the beautiful thing for me was I was going to college. And so, I like in my head, I was like, okay, I will finish college and just like take all the matches that I can and have no expectations for my career. And I think that was very powerful, that I wasn't really trying to get anywhere. I was just trying to finish my degree. And within that, I ended up, started wrestling a lot. And so, again, and I never thought I could make it to anywhere except that world. And that's why I've championed the independent scene for so long. Is for some people, it's the only option, and you can make success in that option. And that was like, I feel as like a mindful, again, and I got my degree in business marketing, and I felt I had a smart mind and educated, and I wanted to make the most out of it. So I was essentially, those first 3 years, I was just learning the job, learning how to wrestle, taking everything. I traveled everywhere as much as humanly possible. I ended up my class schedule was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, a full schedule because I wanted to keep my Mondays and Fridays open. And so I would take Friday, Saturday, Sunday bookings, you know, Thursday if I could get it, Monday if I could get it, I would take all the bookings that I possibly get. And we were driving, you know, I was living in Michigan. We would drive to Minnesota once a month. That's a 10-hour trip for me. We were driving to Louisville almost 2 or 3 times a month, Cleveland, St. Louis. We were going everywhere possible. And I don't know, I wasn't thinking about the money. I wasn't thinking about being huge. I was just trying to learn the job. And then, you know, I got to the point where I graduated. I was like, oh shit, what do I do now? I became a teaching assistant because I knew I didn't want to like get a real job because then I wouldn't be able to, you know, pursue wrestling. Like I wanted wrestling to be my real job. And the teaching assistant, it's like you work 8 to 3, and then you could work on the weekends. And then because I wasn't that important in the teaching, you know, world, like if I counted down my sick days, and I was able to like split my sick days if I wanted to leave like half a day on a Friday. And so it got to the point where I was doing a tour. I got asked to do a weekend tour of England while I was a teaching assistant. And then I came to the realization, and the principal came to the realization, is just like, of course, first of all, he was grateful enough to let me do it, which is cool because I know Matt Stryker ended up getting fired for that very reason. And I was in the Chicago public school system. I know Matt was like, you're not allowed to. And this guy was like, please live your dream. You're just a teaching assistant. So, which was very cool. And so I got to that, after 2 years of that, I went and became a full-time wrestler on the independent scene. At first making about $7,000 a year, but not living at my parents, living in the city, you know, me and a bunch of friends living in a small place, taking, you know, the train to the airports. Cause at that point I was with Ring of Honor full time, and they were paying me $125 a show. And you know, we would do weekends. So that's $250 a weekend. And then you pick up other gigs, and then you're selling merchandise. So right away, my brain is going like, how do I make money? My brain wasn't going, how do I get to the WWE? It was, how do I pay these bills in Chicago, Illinois, and live the life of like a fun 20-year-old while being a professional wrestler? And that's where you know, at the earliest stage, you say like influencer, that's where like the hustle comes from. Also, remember, I was wrestling, you know, with Johnny Stewart of the AWA, who was at the merchandise table, just like flogging anything and everything. It was a friggin' garage sale for this guy. So like, I picked up those things of like, oh, that's how you can make money. You sell merch, you know, you do different ways, and I became the hustler that I became. And it wasn't to make it to the WWF. It wasn't to make it anywhere. I wish that people would see me, but it was just to month make my nut to live as a human being.
What was the biggest thing you'd sell on merch? Pictures, shirts. What?
Yeah, well, very early, you know, I tell the story that I would sell like, so I would go, so in like 2004, I did a show in San Diego, and then we did a show in Tijuana. And at that point, I was doing shows with Honky Tonk Man, and I was doing shows with Salvatore Sincere, who's Johnny Gunn. Is that right? Tom Brandy.
Yeah, Tom Brandy. Yeah.
And they would sell wrestling masks, lucha masks. And I was like, this is where, right? It wasn't even like Colt Cabana's popular. At first, it was these masks. I'm doing all of these shows with all of these kids. And again, I'm taking any show that I can. So, you know, now it's fun. Now I realize like I have all this merch, but if you don't do any shows, you don't sell any merch. That's how that works in person for live events. So, yeah, I figured out how to get these lucha masks, and I would buy them for $2 and I would sell them for 10. And that was my markup. You go to Tijuana, you grab them from the guys off the street, and then eventually you become friends with them, and then they start cutting you deals. And so I was selling my, you know, making my car payments. I was making my rent by selling these lucha hoods, for these lucha hoods off the street at shows in America, because it's like, well, these are specialties in Mexico, but nobody in Indiana or Ohio or the Midwest has access to or is selling lucha masks at wrestling shows, and the kids would love it. And I remember Honky Tonk Man was like, yeah, you give one of the kids the mask, and then they're running around with it, and then every kid is like, I need a mask, you know? And I was like, oh, it's genius. So that's what I was doing at first. And then one of the cool parts of my career was that point where my merch started selling more than my lucha masks, or my bootleg Macho Man Randy Savage CDs, or whatever, or whatever it was. And so I think that was like a real like proud moment where I was moving stuff as opposed to bringing the swap meet or whatever to try to make ends meet.
Jerry and Les Thatcher were the ones who created the wrestling t-shirts business and the merch table.
Speak more, please.
Well, they did the same thing, that college degree did come in handy in the marketing. So Les and I were real young in the business, and we're making the first big concert I ever went to in my life was Rod Stewart concert in Charlotte, North Carolina. We made it, drove like crazy, made it there. We got there just as the concert was ending, as a wrestler's luck is. But coming out of that concert was all these beautiful young girls with Rod Stewart t-shirts on. And we were the only thing on TV in Carolinas in the early 70s. So we looked at Les, hey man, those t-shirts would look great on some of our fans. Well, let's do some. So right up the road was Winston-Salem, where all the mills were, the t-shirt mill, Hayes and all. They had what they called their second. So we go up there and buy a truckload of second t-shirt. We had Jerry Lawler design the artwork for the Brisco Booster and the Thunderbolt Patterson Les Thatcher t-shirt. And we went to Crockett. So Charlotte ran a lot of outdoor shows, a lot of stadium shows, football stadium. So went to Crockett. Can we sell some t-shirts here? Well, yeah, but, just don't interrupt the flow of the evening. So Les and I, we ran around, find the best looking, well endowed young lady and put her in a tight t-shirt, like you said, like with a mask. Let her run around, and pretty soon here comes everybody over. I want to look like that,
But Jerry, you also created the merch table too, because
the merch table. Well, that's it. At the football stadium, we'd had to set up a table because we're selling out of the trunk of the car in the beginning, and then it got so big we had to set up a table. That's when Crockett started. Well, you guys are doing too good on this. Where's my piece? So we kind of got piecemealed out of the action there. But yeah, we were the first ones. This is 1971 or something like that.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think like Dr. X would put the
Dr. X. Yeah, he came along right after we did.
In the magazines, right? He would put ads
in the magazine. Yeah, and also if you look at some of the old magazines, Apter gave us Brisco Booster little ads, little quarter inch ads, and every one of his magazines. And we got Florida Championship Wrestling to run it. We got Georgia Championship Wrestling to run it. We had Mid-Atlantic run it, and all in their program, their nightly program. We had a mail order at PO box where these people send money orders into, and we'd fill out money orders.
And now, would you pay anybody, or was it like, hey, you can do a story about it?
You got a free T-shirt, baby.
You gave him a free.
Yeah, and after got all those New York mags were free to us, and of course the local promoters in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, they just gave us a little space in their magazine down at the bottom of it, mail order, PO box, whatever it was, Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I think that, like, that's something I've learned over the years is like us as wrestler is the currency, right?
Right.
And especially so, like when I started my podcast very early, like I started the Art of Wrestling in 2010, and some fans who were podcasters, like they would get upset that I would get a lot of credit, and they would be like, how are you getting these guests? And I'm like, well, like I have relationships with them, and so it's just like we're just doing it as buddies, and like that's like the currency is like why is your show popular? It's like, well, I put in 10 years of professional wrestling, like if you put in the work in podcasting as an internet podcaster to whoever this like fan would be, like if you put in the hard work, and miles and all of that stuff, like people would then know who you are, but you haven't, so it just doesn't come to you. Like the popularity came because I had done 10 years in a stint with the WWE and, a stint in Japan. And so like, that's why people were interested in my show. And that's why I gained popularity. And so it's like, I love the idea of a barter of, hey, like you get to whatever, like you get to put the Brisco ad, like it should cost you money, but hey, Bill Apter, I'll do you this favor.
Yeah, and Apter too, if you got to consider, Apter was brand new in his business too, so he was after every interview he could get, right. and he was stationed in New York, so he didn't have the connections in the South that Jack and I could bring him all those connections. After he called Jack and me, hey, can you get me Paul Jones or can you get me Tim Wood, Mr. Rassin for an interview? he didn't have those connections at the time. He hadn't been around the building. So we'd say, yeah, run us that little ad.
Yeah, it's a great business move for both of you.
It just put us right in the magazine.
So you were prostituting out all the boys.
You damn right, man. And that worked.
With your t-shirts.
Oh, is this your first day in wrestling, John? What?
It's not my first day around Mr. Brisco.
But yeah, it worked. And then the green part came along. We wanted to expand into the big building. Richmond Coliseum was our first big venture. Man, we invested a lot of money in those t-shirts, got them up there. And man, we're gonna make a killing. The first big house in the Charlotte Coliseum or the Richmond Coliseum, 6, 7, 8,000 people, 10,000, whatever it was. So we had all these shirts there. All of a sudden, the building, all the concession people are pissed off because we got all the people that buy concession at our t-shirts there. And then the building manager goes up to the promoter, Murnick, and said, hey man, we got to have a percentage, and well, it's not this and mine, this is these guys. Here comes the manager. God, we got to have a cut of the action because you're taking hits away from us. So there goes that, and then the word gets to Crockett how we're doing, and all of a sudden Crockett's calling, hey guys, you can't sell the t-shirts at our arenas anymore unless you cut us down too. So there goes another piece of our action. Before you know it, we're piecemealed out where we're not making a profit and going through all the work, carting the stuff around in the back seat of our cars, the trunk of our cars. Couldn't charge rent because you had your car full of merchandise. So it just got, and then I took off to Florida and Les got a break somewhere else. So we just kind of let it fly. But I often look back, man, if we would have hung on to that. Because like I said, Jerry Lawler actually did our artwork for the first sets of t-shirts, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Did you pay him?
No, we're free. Right for money,
Do you have one of those shirts? Are those?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I still got one of the originals. I got the Brisco Booster one and the Thunderbolt original one.
Have you taken? Have you put those on?
No, and I'm not either because I just got one of them.
No, have you taken a picture and put it on social media or anything?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay, I have to go back and look at that.
Yeah, but Thunderbolt Patterson was he sold like crazy. I mean, he was one of the first big black stars, Afro American stars that came along, and his t-shirts just sold like crazy. We were shocked at how well they sold, and we actually had Andre the Giant sign a contract. I wish I had that contract around. Where this was before he had hooked on to Vince Senior or Vince Jr. as a regular for them. So we were getting ready to pop his t-shirt, and then a couple other guys. I mean, we had a lot of guys like.
Were you paying him at least?
We were paying everybody. All the talent was getting like a nickel a shirt or a dime a shirt, whatever. We only charged them $5, probably $1.50, and that we did all the work.
You're making $1.50 and giving them a nickel.
A dime, John, probably a dime, 10%, But we were shipping them out. We were doing all the damn work, Sound like a promoter, don't I?
And you were a high class world professional wrestler at this time too, right?
Yes, sir. I like to think I was. Yeah. Other people will say different, but yeah. And that's all we sold. Les had all these. Les wanted to really break it. Les, if I think of if Les and I would have stuck together and done it, I think we would have started a brand new business for wrestling at the time. Because we were just copying off of rock stars, because the concerts, the big mega concerts had just started, so they're getting every dime and nickel they can from the fans, and that's when we looked around and said, hey, if they got to write a deal, we don't.
Well, it's interesting because I have a couple of trajectories in my career, but so after WWE, when I got released, I started this kind of, I think you said influencer movement of all right, what's my move? And I had been going to a lot of alternative comedy shows and alternative music shows, and they were really about support us as independent artists. That was the big thing that I saw outside of wrestling. The same way that you saw it in music, I was everyone's hey. And this is again 2010, so it's support independent artists, and it was a real big movement. And so that was kind of my eye opener of oh, independent wrestlers that's what we are too. We are these you know, it's just like, we don't have a giant corporation. Every dollar counts. Every time you give us $20 for a t-shirt, that goes to helping me live. And so that was kind of like the same movement for me, of the second half of my career. And it led us to, you know, me and Ryan Barkin, we started Pro Wrestling Tees together. And it's, you know, that's become $1 million business itself. So, you know, it is, I don't know if, well, maybe your Les Thatcher would have been my Ryan Barkin, but
yeah. And speaking of Ryan, I think Ryan's got the t-shirt on Pro Wrestling Tees too. They're still booster. And then the one he has there for sale is a photograph of the original artwork that Jerry did too.
So John, you would feel good because now I'm getting the $1.50 and he gets the dime. So
excellent. Excellent. I like that exchange rate. Colt, forgive me. I did not know that you started. I'm a terrible, apparently, researcher, but as Gerald says, I went to Texas public schools. You started Pro Wrestling Tees.
Yeah, Ryan and I did. Yeah. I mean, he's the business and the brains, but you know, at that time, I was just like, Ryan and I had formed a relation. Yeah, we had formed a relationship, and I was going there and I was picking up so many shirts because shirts were so hot for me at the shows. Again, I was doing my podcast. Fans were coming because they were fans of the podcast. You know, everything's back. Like I would put out this podcast, I would say, come to my shows. More people would come to my shows. More people would want to go to my merch stand to support me. And I was doing so many shirts, and like, and then I was getting my friend, you know, like it's so hard to find a shirt guy. He was my shirt guy, and he just had, you know, and then I would send the Young Bucks there. I would send Adam Pearce there. I would send all of these different wrestlers to be like, here's your new shirt guy. Ryan would see that I was doing all this business at individual shows, and he's like, let's do business for people who can't come to these shows. And I always thought that was important because I saw how dedicated fans were in the major metropolitan cities. If I was doing a show in Philadelphia, you know, Philly fans, New York fans, they're amazing. But you know, there's those fans in Idaho that don't get these unreal PWG style shows, and you know, they watch from afar, but they're never going to be able to go up and buy your shirt. And you know, I had a coltmerch.com site, but most wrestlers don't, where you send from your closet, you pack yourself. You know, I was doing that because for me, every nickel counted. But a lot of these wrestlers didn't. And so that's kind of how we formed the thing. I went up to all the wrestlers. I was like, here's the deal. Here's your cut. You know, you have to do absolutely nothing, and we'll give you money. So a lot of wrestlers.
That's the key right there. Absolutely nothing. And you
absolutely
get a cut.
Nothing. They were the Andre the Giants, and we were going to be the Gerald Briscoes.
There you go.
That's awesome. So what's the key to, is it just getting a hot shirt? Is that the key? I mean, what's the key to sell? Is there one?
Getting over the key.
Getting over, yeah.
That's number 2, I think.
It's interesting what becomes hot. Like, yeah, it's a great, obviously like Bullet Club. I mean, just, for me, there was this I Starve David Colt shirt that was like my main one. And you'd go to these independent shows and there would be 20 people with it, which would fill, which would be, you'd be like, Jesus, a baby blue I Star Colt shirt kind of. And then, that fizzled out. And then like, what's the next thing? And the next thing were these Bullet Club shirts. And I know you guys, I'd hope you remember where they were at every single show and every WrestleMania that Hot Topic called them and was like, we want these instead of WWE shirts.
Yeah.
And
what to sell that one? You got a roundabout number on how, or you probably got the exact number. You own the damn company. Right?
Oh yeah, I don't have. I don't. Ryan has the numbers. I don't have the numbers, but
they
yes.
had to be in the millions because every fan in the world had a Bullet Club.
It was right. It was the coolest, and yeah, I don't know the magic, but I think Jerry's right. It's like it is about being over. Like Austin 316 is selling more than Savio 430, or whatever it is. Like,
I don't know. After Saturday night, Savio.
Yeah. I think that's why he was in my head when I said that.
We had at one time APA had the hottest selling shirt, but it's all off the name, off the phrase we had. I watched that Harlem Nights, I think it is.
Yeah, with the Eddie Murphy.
The heavyweight champion had a stutter, and he would say, "Don't take this ass whooping personally." I think it was Harlem Nights, or I think that was our boogie. One of the two. The heavyweight champion had a stutter. And so I looked it up and no one had patented that phrase, "Don't take this ass whooping personally." So I had the WWE put that on the back of a shirt. And the dang thing was the number one selling shirt for like 3 months. It was unbelievable. Everybody was wanting to get that shirt during the Attitude Era.
Well, I mean, I assume you know, but like, you know, one of your shirts has kind of become a meme in these days.
Oh, the
Always pounding ass.
always pounding ass. Yeah, yeah. And me and Ron knew it would. We knew it would.
Okay.
We did it on purpose. That was that.
You didn't even know what a damn meme was, John.
No. We didn't know what a meme was, but we knew we saw that, and we both laughed so hard when we saw it. Ron goes, "That's perfect." And go, "Oh my God, that's great." So, yes, 100%. Yeah, that
Okay.
was.
Did you guys come up with it, or how
No. They gave it to us. We'd have never come up with it. And when they gave it to us, we looked at it and thought, "You got to be kidding me! They would have put this on a shirt."
I mean, there was some like
And when they did, I
vagina.
thought-
Remember that?
We thought it was
No, what was the one with China?
Vagina, like vagina. There
Oh,
was
okay.
vagina.
Oh,
Wow.
we couldn't believe that somebody would put that on a shirt, always pounding ass. And when we saw it, Ron goes, "That's perfect." They go, "Oh my God, it's great."
Well,
So,
Godfather wrote a fatty for Pimp Daddy or something like that. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Do people
was
at
it.
conventions come up with the always pounding ass? Have they like collected it and brought it to you?
Every once in a while, you know,
Okay.
what most people don't realize, I've never told the story until now, is that we were in on it, not in on the joke. The marketing guy was not. Whoever the marketing person was thought that was a good idea. Me and Ron knew it was a terrible idea, but me and Ron thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Because like, who in the world would put this shirt out there? And so that's what we did.
And who would wear it?
And who would wear it? Yeah, me and Ron goes, "You got to be kidding me. They're going to have a shirt always proud." I said, "Yes, they are. This is the greatest thing I've ever heard."
That's great.
Yeah, that was
So as you were rolling along, and what was the call that when you finally got the call to come to WWF? Were you in Ohio Valley at the time, or where were you?
Well, so what happened was I was wrestling on all of these independent shows, and what happened was I was wrestling everywhere. I spent 3 months in the UK.
And I'm gonna jump in there. You're doing all your own booking at this time. You didn't have anybody helping there. How was you getting it done?
I still don't have anyone helping.
You still
me.
don't have.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't.
That's
don't want-
amazing.
I don't
me
want
and
to give
Jerry don't
anybody.
either. That's why we don't get booked.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just don't want to give anybody a cut.
Yeah.
So I was before I got signed with WWE, I was on the independents for about 10 years, and I had wrestled everywhere. You know, like I had spent 3 months in the UK. I was doing the Butlins shows out there. I was doing tours of Puerto Rico, tours of Japan. You know, tours of Europe, and eventually got to the point where the WWE wasn't necessarily interested in me, but all of my friends had made it to the WWE, and all of my friends loved my wrestling style so much that they were like, why wouldn't you have Colt Cabana? Like, no one got it. And it even got to the point where like Regal and Matt Hardy and Ken Anderson and all, you know, I think they got to Johnny Laurinaitis, and I think they kind of just gave in, and they're like, all right, I guess if everyone's wants him, we should probably sign him. And so I took I read recently that, Sami Zayn, talked about taking a pay cut. I did the same thing. When I signed with WWE for my developmental deal, I took a pay cut from the independents. I think I was making about 65 to 70,000 one year on the independents in 2007 when I signed, 2006. And I signed for $750 a year, which was like $30,000 a year or something like that for WWE. But I knew it was an investment in my future. Like, that's the only place you can make millions of dollars. And so went to OVW for a year. I got over because I was wrestling in Louisville before. The fans knew me. I was over. People liked me.
Who was part of your OVW class?
Let's see. Drew McIntyre, Wade Barrett, Ziggler, Matt Sydal, Amish Roadkill. I'm trying to think of the other. Yeah, I mean, there's a handful.
Yeah,
right?
you had a hell of a crew there. In other words.
Yeah, and then we got moved down to Florida to FCW with Steve Kern, and I'm sure you guys have plugged Steve's book. I haven't read it yet, but I can only imagine the stories in that thing. And
it's great. It's great. And she was out here at my house last weekend.
Oh, nice. Oh, yeah. And Steven, I wasn't really a fan of my time at OVW when it came kind of the coaches, but Dr. Tom Pritchard and Steve Kern were amazing. I really loved being with them and their love for wrestling. And it's, now in my, I just turned 43. Like, I know I'm not the age that they were, but like realizing, how hard it is to kind of like be in that position where you're really not thanked for anything as the coach, and you're watching all these guys go on to be millionaires or whatever, like I understand that could be a hard position, but they were great. And they loved wrestling and they loved teaching wrestling. And that's where like Sheamus and Swagger and all of those guys were with me at FCW. And I think so. It got to the point, I think, where, Dusty Rhodes once told me that like he's like, we don't need to be down here. At this point, I'd been wrestling 12 years or something in the developmental system. And so I think it was like, well, we're not going to fire him because he's very good at wrestling. So it's like, we'll throw him up on the roster. And that was the time where like, there was a lot of us where it was just like, throw him up, give him a couple matches, and then fire him in a couple of months. And it was like me and Kazarni and Swagger and Ryan Braddock and Gavin Spears. The guy with the rally towel. I forgot what his name was. Ricky Ortiz. And I'm a wrestler who like grows on you. Like I'm not you don't look at me and you're not like, whoa, look at that man's body. Everywhere I went, I got over very organically, because I think I'm personable and I have a charming disposition. And so,
so you're saying you were the Johnny Valentine of your age group.
Oh, maybe. I never met Johnny Valentine.
So it took Johnny a while to get over it, just like that did you, right?
But I would get over everywhere I went. I would get over it. I would become, like I was just a schmuck who was headlining UK shows, like why should that be happening? But it was. And I just didn't have, in my process is like my first match was against Brian Kendrick. Brian was getting ready to like be in this 4-way main event against Triple H. So obviously, like I'm not being spotlighted, and so I lost in 2 minutes. My second match, it was a handicap match with me and Funaki versus Kali, and so like I'm not bitter, but like I do think that like I really wasn't, I wasn't like set up to have the best situation, and so I just I had like 6 matches of like losing very quickly. You hear different stories. It led to the most success I've ever had in my career, which was my post WWE career, was embracing the internet, embracing new media, embracing podcasting, embracing documentaries and YouTube. And I made 10 times what I made in WWE after that.
So the timing of you coming along, just from that was the growth of the internet, growth of social media, where you were able to utilize your education a little bit too, and get out there and promote yourself through your marketing background, your schooling there. So and the timing, you just had to be just right. And how did you approach that? I mean, did you see this thing as a tool that I could really jump on and really help me out there, or were you kind of skeptical, or what?
Well, I mean, I always say wrestling's 5 years behind the times. So right. I'm obsessed with alternative comedy. I love alt comedy. I was just watching what they were doing. And that's what they were doing. We're doing these kind of podcasts, doing these kind of YouTube shows, doing these kind of documentaries. And I was like, oh, I can't wait for the wrestlers to start doing this. And then it's like, oh, I should just be the one that does it. But also it was out of fight or flight. Like, it was like, what was I going to do? Like, I put my resume on monster.com, but I was like, I don't want, like, I like wrestling is what I like. I feel I'm educated at it. I know it. And so I think it was just like, I need to make money. And I got fired from WWE. So I knew I wasn't going back there anytime soon. So I just kind of dove in. I was like, what's going to make me the most successful on this independent scene? And I got to figure it out somehow. And I got to use my education, but I also want to, I always have the saying of like, I want to be the wrestler that I would want to watch, or I want to be the wrestler that I would want to support. So that's why my style is kind of comedic. That's why I like kind of doing jokes within the ring. My favorite wrestler is Les Kellett and Catweasel. Like, those are the wrestlers that I love. And so that's what I kind of wanted to portray, because if I was enjoying myself, I feel others would enjoy me, as opposed to be like, I love Dean Malenko, but I don't think that's what I wanted to be as a wrestler. I love him and appreciate him as a wrestler, but I think if I was casual Scott, like that wouldn't be for me. I liked Boogie Woogie Man and Junkyard Dog and Terry Funk when he was, a wild man or whatever. So,
have you ever had anybody like tell you not to do comedy?
Of course, yeah. It's probably
is there anybody in particular that might be on this show that told you that?
Oh, God, I remember I would. Oh, do you think it was you or do you think it was Jerry?
No, it wasn't me.
Okay.
Me.
No,
I think.
Go on.
Could it possibly have been that Mr. Briscoe might have been the one that would say comedy probably isn't gonna work?
No, well, Jim Cornette's the one that says that.
Well, I remember you asked me up in Iowa one time.
Oh, really?
Comedy, and I told you, I don't think comedy is going to make you $1 million.
Well, you should see my bank account.
Trying to bury.
Yeah, I know it.
Help me here.
No, I'm not going to help you, John. You're trying to bury me.
No,
Scotty,
I'm not talking
Scotty,
to you.
I brag on you all the
Colt.
time. You're one of those guys that, man, you took that lemon and you made the best damn lemonade you could possibly make out of it. And you're the Mount Rushmore of independent wrestlers to how to make money and how to get over, man. I've always appreciated that about you. And not only did you have the knowledge of getting over, but you had the ring skills to get over too. And that's probably the reason why I said that uneducated quote that I said that the comedy ain't gonna make you $1 million, which it did. But anyway, yeah, it takes a special person to be able. John and I talked about this earlier, obviously, and we talked about this earlier. It takes a special person to be able to take that routine and get over with the fans where they do buy you. But you became one of the most successful independent wrestlers ever in the history of the business. But you and Adam Pearce had a feud going that really attracted me to both of you guys. I didn't really know either one of you until people started to send me bits and pieces of your quest for the NWA title, and I think that was one of the best chases that I'd seen in years, since back to the 70s and 80s of NWA wrestling. But how did all that come about with you and Adam?
Yeah. And so that's, where you said, like, you have to know the foundation. Like, if I'm going from show to show, I'm doing my comedy routine, but I understand the psychology enough to know that, like, what makes it great is a heel. If I'm doing fun and the crowd gets to see me having fun, the heel that takes that away is going to give them heat because the fans can't see me having my fun in the wrestling. And so I always thought the comedy wrestler could be used so well to tell those kind of stories of all of a sudden, this heel, Adam Pearce, is beating me up so hard that, like, now I can't have fun. And now here comes my rage of wanting to beat the crap out of him. So, like, we can get to the point where I finish him and now I can get back to having fun in my life. I think that's movie storytelling right there. And so Adam was such a great heel. And that's the kind of story was we took my popularity. I was put in contention for the NWA championship, and to help regrow the NWA. No offense to the Colorado kid Mike Rapata, but I think the NWA needed a little kick in the ass to get with the times a little bit. And I think
was it Howard Brody running NWA at that time? Who was running it during this segment?
It was Dave Marquez.
Babe.
But it was the thin. He was a lawyer. Do you remember who that was?
Yeah, I know exactly. I can't think of the name.
Yeah. He was him and Dave. But Dave was the one. I'd worked with Dave for a long time, and Dave had that show, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, out in California. And Adam and I, he started in the Midwest with me. I would go to wrestling practice and he would be there. And Adam was one of the first kind of independent stars from the Midwest. When the AWA died, it was like we didn't have any independent stars. Adam was one of the first. He was really making a name for himself. He was doing, he was working all over. And so we became friends. We played at rival high schools. And so and also I think at wrestling practice, like the athletes kind of like the ones who kind of get it kind of come together, like attracts like, right? So we became very quick friends and yeah, like 10 years later or 12 years later, whatever it was, Adam was running around with the NWA championship. I think they wanted, me to represent the NWA, and Adam's always looking to get the most out of everything. That's kind of what he was known for. So he's like, well, instead of doing one, you know, I don't know how the story came, but you know, we ended up doing seven matches around the country. And before that, we had built an 8-month storyline at the NWA Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. So that was the 7 Levels of Hate was the second time I went for the championship. The first time we had done TV and we had built that for 8 months to where it got to the point where, you know, the fans did rush in and celebrate with me in the ring, which I know, you know, is a throwback, but I think we built the fans to the emotion so much that they were so happy that I won that fans did come in and celebrate with me. And the second one was, you know, us retelling a story in a different way. And that was where we would travel around the country and the world, because our last match was in Australia to do that. And Adam's the best. Adam's exactly what you would want as a heel. I know in his heart, he is like, how come they won't let me wrestle on TV? I know that, you know, and not from him specifically, but I'm sure he was like, I could be in there, but it just shows what a great performer is he, that he's taking whatever he's doing and, you know, he's able to talk. He's always a great talker and he's, you know, making the most. And now he's a personality with WWE, the largest, you know, wrestling promotion in the world.
You guys made videos of that, and they sold like hotcakes all over the world too.
Yeah. Yeah. We did a documentary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that's part of the marketing process is how do we get the most out of something? You know, like, we don't want to bleed it dry, but we want to take advantage.
You know, Jerry's right, and we both, Jerry and I both have huge admiration for what you've done. Same as you know, Matt Cardona. I've never called him Zach Ryder. We had him on the day, and it's so hard because I've always called him Zach. You know, it's you know how it is. You always, and people wonder about that sometimes. You always call them by their gimmick name, so you never make a mistake when you're doing interviews. That's the old mindset, at least. But you know, Cody did the same thing. I mean, it's just really just a cool thing to be able to go out there and create something from scratch. And it's so much easier to just get a job. You know, it's easier to get a job, you know, and figure out, end up in a big company and all of a sudden you either get pushed or you don't. But when you don't have a job, you don't have a safety net, that's when it's tough. And that's when it can be really rough to try to make it. And so I have a lot of admiration for what you've done. And also for what you've done. I
appreciate that.
You've got a deep knowledge of everything because of that. You know, if you'd have just made it to WWE and made it as a talent wrestler or whatever, you wouldn't have that deep knowledge. You wouldn't have that knowledge of how to do promotion, how to do all this stuff. And I think even though it's a harder route, I ask you, do you like that route better?
Yeah, I think I've become a better person for it. You know, a seasoned understanding of the industry. And a lot of people don't understand why Kevin Steen and Sammy like got over to the extent that they did, or why, you know, I was on all of those shows with Brian Danielson. We did so many little shows in front of nobody where nobody knew who we are. And we didn't have TV saying, here's a giant star, cheer for him. Like we had to really figure out how wrestling works to the point where a giant company signs you because you're so popular. And like, that's, if you really break that down, that's pretty crazy to think that like, that's how much work you put into your job to get to. Whereas, you know, WWE or, you know, is signing, you know, whatever, Brock and Shelton, you know, right from, and here's your money and, you know, into the system, we'll pull you up at a month, in a year, and then you'll make your millions. But for, you know, Sammy and Kevin and Brian and Tyler Black, who's Seth Rollins, it's no one's, you know, we're paying our $2,000, $3,000 just to learn. And then we're putting on shows, and we really have to learn you really learn psychology of wrestling because you're forced to, because if you don't, then you're not going to have a job or not going to be in it, or you'll just be that guy who does the matches once a month in your local town. But you really understand what works and why it works and how to use it. And you have all of these things in your pocket of when this situation goes this way or this situation goes that way. And WWE wrestlers do, you know, they do. But you know, there's such a safety net there, and deservedly so. And there is no safety net in the independents. And I do believe in the independents were kind of shit on for so long. And I think that's why some of the top stars, a lot of the top stars come from that era because we figured it out. You know,
Right.
no one was there. We figured it out. And I think it made us all better wrestlers, better humans, better businessmen, better businesswomen. And I think it was great, but it's such a long-term investment. And I tell people that at training, you know, if I do seminars, I'm like, this is the long-term investment. It will not, you know, in 10 years, you might be okay at this job. So, you know, get ready. This is a lifetime thing. You have to be ready for it.
But you know, it's one of the hard things that for the current talent that come up, that go through a system, a set system, an enclosed system in a silo, and don't have that experience. You know, you have all this vast experience. Mr. Brisco and I have this huge experience of having worked all over the world in different, when there were territories, working in different places. You know, for a guy like Brock Lesnar to come along and become this massive superstar, most guys are not Brock Lesnar. You know, most guys don't have that ability to, because you don't have that educational background. It's almost it almost hampers you because of the fact that you don't have this education. You know, you look at it and you go, it's a lot tougher road. Yeah, but it also gives you that education that most people don't get, which is tough. So it's to me, it's tougher now on current talent that are coming up in the system, that because they don't have that education, than it is on the older guys who had to work a lot harder to get there because they got that education.
Well, I was in the system and I saw the ones, and then I saw them like trying to, you know, for every Brock Lesnar or Sheldon or whatever it might be, I saw the ones that they loved from their pictures. They got signed, they were paid, you know, nicely, and then they were fired. And it's like, no one wanted to do those independent shows. So there's, you know, sometimes they're like, yeah, but look, these people have made it. But there's thousands of wrestlers out there who were brought into that silo and then released, and we don't know about them in wrestling. And I, you know, my heart is with the ones that then are like, oh, I want to do this, and then stick with the independent wrestling and become the wrestlers that they do, and then maybe go on back to an AEW or WWE and a higher recognition. I think that's something, I think that says a lot, because a lot of us get into independent wrestling at a very young age, knowing that there's no money and just like accepting that there's no money. But it's hard once you're getting paid that money and then being like, hey man, you're going to get $50 for this show and you got to do this, you know, for 70 straight weeks. And like, it's not, you know, it doesn't make sense in any business world. It does not make sense to keep with it. But, you know, you have, you know, I think you have to look at it as an artist as opposed to a business person.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that's the reason we don't see a lot of these guys. You see them on NXT or you see them on AEW for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden they disappeared because they didn't have the talent, they didn't have it, whoever the guy in charge was looking for, whatever that it is. And but you don't see a lot of those guys going off into the independents because they didn't have that independent background when they first come out. So that's the passion for the business that you kind of develop, taking that hard road that you took there, and more respect for the business, you know. And I like to compare independents, you know, back in the day, there were great territories you wanted to go to. There were great territories that you didn't want to go to because of the, well, the same with these independent promoters. There's just some great independent promoters out there that really take the business seriously and really do all those 7 steps that we've talked about a couple of times in this show today. And they take those 7 steps seriously and they promote. So I really feel the good promoters, independent promoters out there today are the territorial promoters of the yesteryear, and they're out there. You just got to do your research and find who they are, and you get with them and learn.
Yeah, I always said like, hey, like some of the old, you know, some of the old timers or whatever, they would like be like, you know, you didn't do the territory, so you don't. It's like we wanted to so bad. You know, it's not like, I'm sorry. Like
it was our generation that took them away from you. So.
Right. Like, believe me, like I was trying to figure out how to do the territories. When I moved to England, I wrestled 85 shows in 75 days because like it was my dream to be like the generation before. I wanted to experience that, but it's so hard to do it. But we would love to. And there's a percentage of us that would love to do it. We were just not afforded it. You know, I remember in OVW, Dr. Death would be like, he would yell at us, just be like, he would just be like, y'all have it so easy. And it's just like, I would love to not have it easy. It's just like, that's not we're not allowed to. You know, it's
Yeah,
just not
yeah.
part of the game anymore.
Yeah.
But you know,
Well,
it's
it's not
all
in
it's
the
like
picture.
it's like Jordan. Jordan, one reason he got in a fight with Steve Kerr was because Steve Kerr came after the first three-peat. And Jordan felt like some of the guys that came along, maybe not Steve Kerr, that was, you know, more of a symptom of Jordan already kind of bubbling over, was, you know, these guys didn't pay their dues to get here. But, you know, Jordan also said, to his credit, it's not their fault.
It's not their fault. Yeah.
You know, the guys that didn't pay the dues like Jerry and I did, and to get this education, it's not their fault. Like you say, they'd love to. And to me, I think it hampers them, as I said earlier, because they don't have the educational background that comes with that experience. You know, it's just, it to me, it's so tough. I don't know how I couldn't have, I wasn't worth anything after a couple of years of wrestling. I'd wrestled all over it after a couple of years, but I couldn't have made it in WWE. I had a hard time making it WWE after several years. You know, if guys like Jerry hadn't been around and guys like Jack Lanza, I wouldn't have made it because I was overwhelmed. You know, and that was after this great educational background. And to me, it's just so tough on the young talent today, boys and girls, to try to make it in a business where you don't have that. You have to manufacture the education.
And I keep that in my mind. And like, I want to be mad when I was in developmental at the football player who just gets in, right? But I would always like take a step back and be like, it's not their fault. And I think it's very important to have that. Otherwise it can, you know, if you let that part of it take over it's not, I don't think it's healthy.
You become grumpy old people like me and Jerry.
Yeah.
That's what you become like. I hope I'm never one of those guys, because the older guys thought we sucked too. And I don't think the young guys suck. I think they're awesome. You know, but it's every generation thinks that they're the best generation.
It's important. It's important to, you know, like you hear the stories of like Harley, you know, people would be like, Harley Race would roll over in his grave. And then you hear the stories of the ones before Harley Race.
Guys suck back then too.
That's what I'm saying. It's like
all these guys go, oh, we need guys like, we need like 20 Shawn Michaels. We didn't have 20 Shawn Michaels back then. We had one.
Thank goodness.
You know, people forget that. Yeah, you had guys in every territory that either couldn't work. Yet, of course, you always had great talent. You got great talent now in places. Yeah. Well, the business right now, what do you think about the, I mean, to me, I've never seen, Jerry, be a better question, maybe. I've never seen the business any hotter. I don't know how it could be. You know, I look at what the business is doing now with stadium shows, with TV contracts, with not just the independents, but all the social media. I mean, there are just, it's unbelievable. You know, I did a hit for India the other day, and I think I just massive amount of business. And you realize, I mean, that wasn't available just a few years ago. What do you think about the business now and where it goes from here?
I mean, you know, lucky enough, like I'm contracted with AEW as a producer and wrestler. So like, it's unbelievable for me that that's a reality right now at my, you know, at my age. I love it. I remember watching Ricochet do like a 6:30 in Japan, you know, him and Will Ospreay had like that series, and just being like, I just remember saying like, yes, that is the craziest thing ever. But in 20 years, that's going to be like nothing. So it's so fun for me to picture 20-25 years, the athleticism of what a wrestler will be able to do, and to make stuff like Ray and Ricochet and Will Ospreay like look pathetic, you know, like they'll just look like sad wrestlers. So that's what excites me, is the progression of it. You know, the wrestling style has changed a little bit, but I hope everyone realizes that it will change. It will always change. It will evolve. We can't get mad at these wrestlers for doing like cool movie style things within a match. Like, that's just how life works. You know, I believe we need to, you know, come up with the times. But, you know, but I am a believer of, you know, a reason why, you know, to do everything. So, and so I think as long as those principles stay, is like, let's make it crazy. Let's make it more athletic. Let's make it as wilder, but let's stay grounded in why it is crazy, why it is wild, you know, why it is exciting. And then, yeah, it's just like from TV numbers alone, you know, the idea that Peacock gives this company $5 billion, you know, when, you know, I think, Did you have, when did you start? I don't think you were guaranteed on a deal, were you, John? I'm not speaking for you, but like,
No, we got the old guarantee that was basically 10 days a year. It was a contract that was, I mean, as Vince said when he gave it to me, his contract didn't work.
Those contracts back there, wow. I mean, you had guaranteed what, 10 days, 2 weeks, or was it 2 weeks? You were guaranteed
10 days
that you would be
days.
you'd be booked 10 days, and that was it.
At $150 a day. So I signed a contract for $1,500.
wow.
I had a deal waiting for me at WCW, and Gerald Mr. Briscoe's the one that hired me. And I came back home to my dad, who didn't know anything hardly about wrestling. And he said, well, so what did you take the guaranteed money?
You take the obvious deal?
The obvious deal, yeah. And I said, no. I met with Vince McMahon, Gerald Briscoe. I took the WWF deal. I didn't want to tell him. He goes, well, how much was it? I said, it's $1,500. My dad said, shrewd.
Yeah.
What are you, like, I raised a moron.
Wow.
But I tell you what, Vince walked in the day, this is how he sold it to me. He walked in, he threw the contract down. He goes, that contract's not worth the paper it's written on, but I guarantee you the handshake. And that's what Vince gave you, was just opportunity. But the contracts came in after NWO after Kevin and Scott went to WCW, and then the contract started coming in right after that. That was what created it.
And even today, like, to make it topical, it's like, the Writers Guild are on strike, like the WGA, like I think they had a strike in 2007, and they wanted specific things, and they were looking into the future. Like, they didn't, they were like, we think streaming might be a thing. And so they were smart enough. And now here we are in that labor strike. And I think it's the same thing. It's like, there's so much potential in the future that we don't even think about, that will come about in 10 to 15 years, of ways to make money. And, wrestling is, we are Americana now. And so I don't really see it going away. I see it just growing and growing and bigger. And it's just going to take the smart, correct people to guide it that way, not take advantage of it, be fair to everybody. I think that's very important, is that that Andre doesn't get his nickel and Jerry gets $1.50, but let's be fair to the world. But yeah, of course, I think it's just going to grow and grow. And I think even in 2 or 3 years, it's just going to, it's going to be bigger than ever.
But that's what happened with the whole WWF lawsuit. They didn't see the internet becoming so prevalent. And of course, the judge, I think, made a crazy ruling in England on it. But they didn't see the internet becoming so much proliferation from it. That you made a deal that you didn't realize technology was going to make that deal obsolete. Not that they should have won the lawsuit, but the point is they didn't realize that something was going to change in the world. And like right now, you don't know. I mean, Elon Musk is talking about doing video and video chat, and he's trying to take over. It looks like he's trying to take over YouTube with Twitter, which is very interesting. It's just so much in the world is changing so fast, Moore's law, that you don't know where it's going to go. You just know that content is always going to be king.
And wrestling's got so much of it.
It certainly does.
Well, Scott, man, we sure appreciate your time today, man, and giving us some insight of modern day competitors out there, and man, we
influencers,
modern day influencer. I'm really privileged, and John and I are just proud as we can be to have a modern day influencer on there. And maybe the rub off of you will make at least me an influencer. I don't have any hope for John.
Hopefully a meme comes out of this of some sort.
Hey, John, you do know what a meme is now, right?
I do now know what a meme is. Yes.
He was calling it Mimi for a while.
That's what I thought it was too, Mimi. What is this stuff anyway? Well, you're one of them. You should know.
Exactly.
So anyway, Scott, where can the folks out there find you and the merchandise team, pro wrestling tees? Shout out to them, man. They've given every independent wrestler a source out there that was unbeknownst, and tell them, except for in my time in the early 70s, and that was just a flash in the pan. Right. I could have been a Scotty Goldman.
You could have been an influencer.
I could have been an influencer.
You didn't want to be a Scotty Goldman, believe me.
No, I would want to done, but yeah.
No. Yeah,
But
and
where can they find? Go ahead.
And that's the fun story about Pro Wrestling Tees is every, so many wrestlers have their shirts up there. Mine's prowrestlingtees.com/Colt Cabana. But, the story I love to tell is that Kevin Steen, who is now Kevin Owens, who is now one of the biggest wrestlers in professional wrestling, he at one time was working an overnight shift, hated it, and wrestling on the weekends. And he was very popular, but, he was one of those wrestlers who didn't want to, kind of lazy when it came to shipping out stuff. We opened him up a store, and he was able to then become a full-time professional wrestler because fans were buying and he didn't have to do anything. And I think that for him to be a full-time wrestler, to focus on wrestling and then move yourself forward, it was a huge thing. And so, yeah, Pro Wrestling Tees has been so influential for wrestlers like that for almost 10 years now. So my plugs at Colt Cabana on everything: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. And I do Twitch. I will get you guys on Twitch eventually, playing some Miss Pac-Man. Twitch.tv/Colt.
I used to have talent where you touted out.
Oh no. For those podcasting, I just slapped my forehead. And then, hey,
the Pac-Man lit up a thing, lit up a light here. I'm a big Pac-Man guy.
You want a Pac-Man on Twitch?
Absolutely. Not Miss Pac-Man as much. The old Pac-Man with the patterns and all the stuff you could do. Yeah.
With the patterns, he said. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I got to ask a question, being an entrepreneur. Who is the all-time number one seller at Pro Wrestling Tees?
I think it's me.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you.
You own a damn company. It should be.
I don't know the number one of all time, but I assume it's either we do have the license to Macho Man and Andre. I'm sure they're up there, but I think Bullet Club, just the Bullet Club numbers over the years.
Wait a minute, you got Andre too? I mean, my lawyers will be talking with your lawyer.
Yeah, we got his license very early, but
I think Les still has the original contract with Andre, so I got proof. Did you have anything signed by Andre that says you got rights?
I shouldn't have done this to myself. I really screwed
up. Thank you.
Yep. Please take that off the record, please.
John will edit that there.
Edit it. We're gonna sue him.
Yeah.
We're gonna get the big hand and bring the shirt back out. Yeah.
I do want to tell everybody about our live experience. We have a live shopping experience at Pro Wrestling Tees. It's called pwtlive.com, and we do live shopping auctions every single Tuesday night at 5:30 Central, where I'm the host. And it's kind of like eBay meets QVC, and I'm hosting it, and it's so much fun. Where it's just we have just all types of merchandise and memorabilia for sale. And it's really become part of the Pro Wrestling Tees world now, are these live auctions and live shopping. So if you go to pwtlive.com, there's shows every day, but the main show is 5:30 p.m. Central, Tuesdays from Chicago. Yeah.
Awesome. Colt, thank you very much for joining us.
I had a great time. You guys are two of my heroes. I love wrestling so much. For everything you've done for professional wrestling, it's so kind to me that you've invited me on and also treated me as an equal. So I really appreciate it.
Well, you are equal. Thank you very much.